The bankruptcy papers sat in front of Victor like a death sentence. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not from fear, he was past that. This was something deeper, something that happened when your body knew you were about to destroy yourself and tried one last time to stop you. In 7 minutes, his lawyer would arrive. In 7 minutes, it would all be over. But a waitress named Delphine was walking toward his table, and she was about to say 4 words that would save his life. "You're making a mistake." The pen felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Victor Hargrove sat alone in the marble lobby of his own building. Well, it used to be his building, staring at the bankruptcy papers spread across the polished table in front of him. Outside, the city was waking up, but in here, time had stopped. 7:53 in the morning. 7 minutes until his lawyer arrived. 7 minutes until he signed away everything he'd spent 30 years building. His hand moved toward the pen, then stopped. His fingers were shaking. Not from fear, he was past fear. This was something deeper. Exhaustion, maybe. Or just the body's way of saying it didn't want to participate in its own destruction. The lobby was empty except for a cleaning cart tucked near the elevators and a waitress from the ground floor cafe wiping down tables in the corner. She'd been glancing at him for the past 10 minutes. He could feel her eyes on him, curious, maybe pitying. He hated that. The pity. That's what everyone had been giving him lately. His board members before they resigned, his wife before she left, his daughter before she stopped returning his calls. Victor picked up the pen. The gold Mont Blanc his father had given him when he made his first $1 million. How fitting that it would be the instrument of his end. "Mr. Hargrove?" The voice came from behind him. Soft, hesitant. He didn't turn around. "I'm busy," he said, though he wasn't. He was just sitting there, frozen, like a man on the edge of a cliff trying to decide whether to jump or step back. "I know. I'm sorry. But I think..." The waitress moved closer. He could hear her footsteps, quiet and careful, like she was approaching a wounded animal. "I think you're making a mistake." That made him turn. She was younger than he'd thought, maybe late 20s, with brown hair pulled back in a ponytail and a stained apron tied around her waist. Her name tag said Delphine. She held a coffee pot in one hand and had that same look everyone had been giving him, concern mixed with something else. But not pity. Curiosity, maybe. "Excuse me?" Victor's voice came out harder than he intended. Delphine didn't flinch. She set the coffee pot down on the table and pointed at the papers. "Those documents. I saw them when I was cleaning earlier. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the numbers don't look right." Victor almost laughed. "Almost. You're a waitress." "I am," she said simply. "But I used to work in accounting. Before." She trailed off, and something passed across her face, something heavy and unspoken. Then she straightened. "Can I look? Just for a minute." He should have said no. Should have told her to mind her own business, to go back to wiping tables and pouring coffee for people who still had lives that made sense. But something in her voice, that quiet certainty, made him pause. "Why do you care?" he asked. Delphine met his eyes, and for the first time all morning, Victor felt like someone was actually seeing him. Not his failures, not his losses. Just him. "Because I know what it's like to give up on something when maybe you don't have to," she said. "And I saw your face when you picked up that pen. You don't want to sign those papers." She was right. God help him, she was right. Victor slid the documents across the table. "You have 5 minutes. Then my lawyer gets here and this all becomes official." Delphine sat down across from him and pulled the papers closer. Her eyes moved fast, scanning lines of numbers and legal language that had taken Victor's attorneys weeks to prepare. He watched her face, looking for signs that this was just a kind gesture from someone who felt sorry for him. But her expression was focused, intense. She wasn't reading to be nice. She was actually looking. "Here," she said after 3 minutes. Her finger landed on a section near the middle of the 3rd page. "This debt consolidation calculation. They've counted your Riverside Holdings assets twice. Once here, under commercial properties, and again here, under investment portfolios. That's $4.2 million in duplicate liabilities." Victor leaned forward. Heart, which had been beating slow and heavy all morning, suddenly kicked harder. What? And this? Delphine flipped to another page. This quarterly projection for your tech division. They're using last year's numbers, but didn't your software subsidiary just secure that contract with the hospital network? I saw it in the news last month. That would change your projected revenue by at least $3 million annually, Victor finished. His mind was spinning now, pulling up numbers and contracts he'd been too exhausted to think about clearly. The contract was finalized 6 weeks ago, but my CFO left before it was entered into the bankruptcy assessment. Delphine nodded. She was still reading, her finger moving down the page like she was solving a puzzle that had been frustrating her for hours instead of minutes. If these numbers are wrong, your debt-to-asset ratio is completely different. You might not even qualify for Chapter 11. You might just need restructuring. The words hit Victor like a wave. Restructuring. Not bankruptcy. Not the end of everything. Just a different path. Who are you? He asked. It came out like an accusation, but he didn't mean it that way. He meant it like a prayer. Delphine looked up from the papers. For the first time, she smiled, small and sad and real. Someone who made mistakes with numbers once and lost everything because of it. I don't want to watch someone else do the same thing if they don't have to. Victor opened his mouth to respond, but the lobby doors swung open. His lawyer, Richard Chen, walked in carrying a briefcase and wearing the same grim expression he'd had for the past 2 months. Behind him was someone Victor hadn't expected. His ex-wife, Patricia, dressed in black like she was attending a funeral. Which, in a way, she was. Victor, Richard said, his voice professional and careful. It's time. Patricia didn't say anything. She just looked at him with those cold eyes that used to be warm, used to look at him like he hung the moon. Now they looked at him like he was already gone. Victor glanced back at Delphine. She was gathering the papers, her movements quick and certain. Wait, Victor said. He stood up, and for the first time in months, he felt something other than despair. He felt possibility. Richard, I need you to review these documents again. I think there are errors in the asset assessment. Richard frowned. Victor, we've been over this a dozen times. Then we'll go over it a 13th time? Victor's voice was stronger now. Not the voice of a man about to sign his life away. The voice of a man who just remembered how to fight. There are duplicate entries and outdated projections. I'm not signing anything until we verify every number. Patricia laughed, sharp and bitter. You're stalling. This is pathetic, Victor. Just sign the papers and let us all move on. But Victor wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at Delphine, who had stood up from the table and was backing away slowly, like she'd done what she came to do and didn't want to intrude any further. Thank you, Victor said to her. Delphine nodded once, then turned toward the cafe. But Richard's voice stopped her. Wait, miss, what's your name? Delphine, she said quietly. Richard looked at Victor, then at the papers on the table, then back at Delphine. Did you find these errors? She hesitated, then nodded. Richard Chen was a lot of things, but he wasn't stupid. He walked over to the table and picked up the documents, his eyes scanning the pages Delphine had marked. His expression changed, just slightly, but enough for Victor to notice. Where did you work before? Richard asked Delphine. Carter and Associates, she said. I was a junior accountant for 3 years before. She stopped, and again that shadow crossed her face. Before I made a mistake that cost the firm a client. I was let go. Haven't been able to get hired in accounting since. Richard looked at her for a long moment, then at Victor. She's right. These numbers need to be rechecked. If what she's pointing out is accurate, this whole filing could be premature. Patricia made a sound of disgust. This is ridiculous. You're listening to a waitress over your own legal team. I'm listening to someone who actually looked at the numbers instead of just processing paperwork, Victor shot back. He felt alive again. Angry maybe, but alive. Richard, I want a full audit of these documents. Today. Before anything gets filed. Richard nodded slowly. I'll make the calls. But Victor, if this doesn't pan out, then I'll sign the papers this afternoon, Victor said. But I'm not signing them now. Not until I know for certain. Patricia grabbed her purse and headed for the door. You're delusional. Both of you. She didn't look back. The lobby fell quiet after she left. Richard gathered the documents and promised to have answers by noon, then disappeared into the elevators. And then it was just Victor and Delphine again, standing in the empty lobby while morning light streamed through the windows. I don't know how to thank you, Victor said. Delphine shook her head. Don't thank me yet. I might be wrong. You're not wrong, Victor said. He didn't know how he knew that, but he did. Why did you help me? Delphine looked down at her hands that should have been holding calculators and spreadsheets instead of coffee pots and dish rags. Because someone should have checked my work before I submitted it. Someone should have caught my mistake before it ruined everything. No one did. So I guess I wanted to be that person for someone else. Victor felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been closed for a very long time. What was your mistake? He asked quietly. Delphine smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I trusted the wrong person with the right numbers. And when everything fell apart, I was the one left holding the blame. She picked up her coffee pot and started walking back toward the cafe. But Victor called after her. Delphine, if this works, if you're right about those numbers, I'm going to need someone I can trust to help me rebuild. Someone who actually pays attention. She stopped walking but didn't turn around. I serve coffee now, Mr. Hargrove. That's all I'm qualified for. That's not true, Victor said. And I think you know it. Delphine stood there for a moment longer, her back still to him. Then she walked away without another word, disappearing into the cafe like she'd never been there at all. Victor sat back down at the table. The pen was still there, waiting. But he didn't pick it up. Instead, he pulled out his phone and started making calls, to his accountant, to his remaining board members, to anyone who might be able to verify what Delphine had found. Because for the first time in months, Victor Hargrove had something he thought he'd lost forever. He had hope. By noon, the lobby had transformed into something Victor barely recognized. His conference room on the third floor was packed with people. Richard Chin, two forensic accountants Richard had called in, Victor's former CFO who'd agreed to come back for one day to review the files, and Delphine, who Richard had insisted needed to be there to walk them through what she'd found. She'd changed out of her stained apron and was wearing simple black pants and a white blouse she must have kept in her locker. She looked uncomfortable surrounded by all these people in expensive suits, but when Richard asked her to explain her findings, her voice was steady and clear. The Riverside Holdings properties were listed twice because they fall under two different legal entities that share partial ownership, Delphine said, pointing to the documents projected on the screen. But the bankruptcy filing treated them as separate assets with separate debt loads. In reality, the debt is shared and should only be counted once. That's $4.2 million in duplicate liabilities that don't actually exist. One of the forensic accountants, a woman named Susan with sharp eyes and gray hair, leaned forward. That's a significant oversight. How did this get past the initial review? Richard looked uncomfortable. The paperwork came from 3 different law firms handling various aspects of Victor's holdings. No one cross-checked between entities. Someone should have, Susan said flatly. She turned to Delphine. What else did you find? Delphine walked them through 5 more errors, some smaller, some substantial. Revenue projections that used outdated data. Asset valuations that didn't account for recent appraisals. A pension fund liability that had actually been resolved 2 months ago but was still listed as outstanding. By the time she finished, the room was silent. Susan looked at Richard. These documents aren't just wrong. They're dangerously wrong. If Victor had signed this morning, he would have declared bankruptcy while still being functionally solvent. That would have triggered asset seizures, credit destruction, and legal complications that would take years to untangle. Victor felt his stomach drop. He'd been 7 minutes away from destroying himself. So what now? He asked. Susan closed her laptop. Now you withdraw the bankruptcy filing, restructure your debt properly, and probably sue whoever prepared these documents for malpractice. Richard winced. That would be my firm. Then I'd suggest you make this right, Susan said. She stood up, shook Victor's hand, and left without another word. The room slowly emptied until it was just Victor, Richard, and Delphine. Richard looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 4 hours. "I'm sorry, Victor," Richard said quietly. "This should never have happened. I trusted my associates to do their jobs, and they failed. I failed you." Victor should have been angry. Part of him was. But mostly he just felt tired. "Get me a new proposal. Accurate this time. I want it by the end of the week." Richard nodded and gathered his things. Before he left, he turned to Delphine. "If you ever want to get back into accounting, let me know. I could use someone on my team who actually reads what they're reviewing." Delphine gave him a small smile but didn't respond. Richard left, and then it was just the two of them. "You saved my life today," Victor said. Delphine shook her head. "I just read some paperwork." "You did more than that." Victor sat down heavily in one of the conference room chairs. The adrenaline that had been carrying him through the morning was fading, and exhaustion was creeping back in. "You gave me a reason to fight when I'd already given up. Do you know how rare that is?" Delphine sat down across from him. She looked different in this setting, professional, capable. Like she belonged here more than she belonged behind a cafe counter. "Why did you give up?" she asked. "From what I saw in those documents, your company was struggling but it wasn't dead. People don't usually file for bankruptcy when there's still a chance." Victor laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Because everyone told me it was over. My board, my lawyers, my wife. After a while, you start to believe them. You start to think maybe they see something you don't. Maybe you're the only one too stubborn or too stupid to accept reality. Or maybe they were all too close to see clearly," Delphine said. "Sometimes it takes someone from the outside to notice what everyone else missed." "Is that what happened to you?" Victor asked. "Is that why you lost your job?" Delphine was quiet for a long moment. Outside the windows, the city hummed with traffic and voices and life continuing on like nothing had changed. But in here, something had changed. Something fundamental. "I was working on a major account," Delphine said finally. "Huge client. My boss gave me numbers to input into the quarterly report, and I trusted him. I didn't double-check his math because he was my supervisor and I thought he knew what he was doing. Turns out he'd been skimming money from the client for months and was using me to hide it in the paperwork. When the client found out, my boss blamed me, said I'd made the errors. I was fired. He kept his job for another 6 months before they finally caught him." Victor felt anger rise in his chest, not at Delphine, but for her. "Did you fight it?" "I tried," she said. "But I was 24 and he was a senior partner. No one believed me. After that, I couldn't get hired anywhere in accounting. Every application I sent out came back rejected. So I took the first job I could find that would pay my rent." She gestured at herself. "And here I am, serving coffee and wiping tables." "That's not where you belong," Victor said. "Maybe not," Delphine said. "But it's where I ended up. And honestly, I made peace with it. I thought maybe I wasn't cut out for that world anyway. Maybe I wasn't smart enough or tough enough or whatever it takes to survive in a place like that." "You were smart enough to catch errors that 3 law firms and a team of accountants missed," Victor said. "You were tough enough to speak up even though you had no reason to get involved. And you were brave enough to walk into a situation where you could have been embarrassed or dismissed, and you did it anyway because you thought it was right." Delphine looked at him, and he saw tears gathering in her eyes. She blinked them away quickly. "I'm offering you a job," Victor said. "My company needs someone who can audit financial documents and catch problems before they become disasters. Someone I can trust to tell me the truth even when it's not what I want to hear. I think you're that person." Delphine shook her head. "Mr. Hargrove." "Victor," he interrupted. "Victor," she said softly. "I appreciate the offer. I really do. But I haven't worked in accounting in 3 years. I don't have current certifications. I don't have references. And honestly, I don't know if I can do this anymore. The last time I trusted my instincts in this field, I lost everything." "And today, your instincts saved everything," Victor said. "Delphine, I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to do what you did this morning. Pay attention, ask questions, And speak up when something doesn't look right. That's all I need. That's all anyone should need. She was quiet for a long time. Victor didn't push. He just waited, giving her space to think, to feel whatever she was feeling. Can I ask you something? Delphine said finally. Anything. Why did your wife leave? The question caught Victor off guard. He'd been expecting her to ask about salary or job responsibilities or hours. Not this. Because I stopped being the person she married, Victor said honestly. I got so focused on saving the company that I forgot about everything else. A marriage. A daughter. Myself. Patricia told me I was drowning and I was too proud to grab the life preserver. She was right. Do you think she'll come back? Delphine asked. Now that things might turn around? Victor thought about Patricia's face in the lobby this morning. The coldness. The finality. No, he said. And maybe that's okay. Maybe some things aren't supposed to be saved. But the company, that's different. That's not just about me. It's about the 200 people who still work for me. The clients who depend on us. The community projects we fund. If I let it die because I was too tired to fight, I'd never forgive myself. Delphine nodded slowly. Thank you, Victor said again. For seeing what no one else did. Delphine smiled. A real smile this time, not the sad ones from earlier. Thank you for listening. Delphine nodded and walked toward the exit. Victor watched her go, then looked down at the pen in his hand. His father had been wrong about one thing. The most important moment wasn't when you signed something. It was when you chose not to. He put the pen back in his pocket and headed for the elevators. Tomorrow he'd start rebuilding.